So we are getting closer and closer to the unveiling of the Nintendo Switch 2 because, well, I mean, there's just way too many coincidences happening right now with various companies, various retailers now listing things, various products that have already been marketed. We've been covering them on the channel because I really find all this sort of stuff interesting. It feels like we're at a point with this thing where it's going to be like, we pretty much know everything about the system itself, just not the software for it, which at the end of the day is, of course, the most important thing. But there are some news stories floating around about Nintendo Switch 2 things. One that I don't believe and I kind of want to put a kibosh on, and one that I do believe, but I feel like is being misrepresented when websites and various outlets are talking about it, because this is actually a substantial change. And it seems like everyone is just sort of downplaying this. So I want to talk about all that stuff in today's video. Thank you guys for checking out these videos. Make sure you hit subscribe if you are new. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is the alleged leak that a European retailer is now taking pre-orders for the Switch 2, and it's being slotted at like $500 when converted into USD. And a lot of people are like, oh, $500 system, blah, blah, blah. As far as the source for that is concerned, it doesn't seem like there is a source. It seems like some individual just made a tweet that there were European retailers taking pre-orders or putting pre-order SKUs into their database for the Nintendo Switch 2 at that price point. And then everyone just kind of ran with it. Everything I've looked for online has no paper trail to it. There's not even a name given for the company itself that is the one that is allegedly taking these pre-orders. So I'm taking that with a huge grain of salt. I don't think the thing's going to be $500. It just doesn't make sense for this system to be $500 based on the technology that we know it has, based on how we know Nintendo likes to price their hardware. Like $400, I think is reasonable. I think a lot of people are potentially expecting something like that, but $500, yeah, I'm not putting any stock into that rumor. So kind of want to put a kibosh on that. Another thing I want to update you guys on is in yesterday's video, I kind of changed my tune about when I thought the system would potentially launch based on some information, a potential advertisement that I was going to do with a third-party company that manufactures Nintendo Switch stuff. They manufacture other stuff. I actually have one of their products for something completely different, that they reached out to me and they wanted to do a sponsor spot coming up for Nintendo Switch 2 accessories. And I actually checked my email yesterday, and within my email I had yet another large company reaching out to me, telling me that they wanted to do something, and sent me some interesting information that I'm not going to talk too much about in the public eye, but I really feel like we are gearing up towards a full unveiling and potentially a quick turnaround time with that unveiling. And our final story, which is really the main story of this video, kind of leads me to believe that as well, because if you're in the United States, what's the biggest video game store that exists? It's GameStop. Even though they're closing down GameStops all over the place right now, quietly is how they're doing it too. GameStop is still the biggest video game retail outlet in the United States. And we have a picture that's been floating around on the internet about Nintendo Switch 2 accessory SKUs now popping up in GameStop's database. And what these actually are very different than a lot of people are acting like they are. So here is the alleged image itself. Now, as someone who worked at GameStop, granted it was 20 years ago, this is the text and the font that I remember in the GameStop system. The back of it is very different, but the actual text that is being shown here is the exact same font that they used 20 plus years ago. So I'm kind of inclined to believe that this is indeed an actual image of something within GameStop's database. Now you can see here there are some different things like a Joy-Con stand for an original Switch, TMNT Switch thumb grips, TMNT Switch carrying case. But the interesting stuff is, of course, the fact that this is Switch 2 dedicated stuff. Joy-Con charger grip for Switch 2, Switch 2 Express MicroSD card in various sizes. And you're seeing this and you're like, okay, what's the big deal here? This is a Joy-Con grip. Like we know that companies are going to make a Joy-Con grip. Micro SD cards, there are already Nintendo branded micro SD cards out there. What's the big deal? Of course, there's going to be micro SD cards that are probably SanDisk brand that come out and it's like, you know, got Zelda or Mario on there, and there's a little bit of a premium price upgrade over that. And in theory, you would be correct, but people are missing something major with this. The Express micro SD card. An Express micro SD card is a different entity than a micro SD card. An Express micro SD card is like 8.8 times faster than a standard micro SD card. And I think that is actually something a lot more interesting than people are realizing, because of the fact that we assume that first-party Nintendo games will still be, you know, cartridge-based, and, you know, you won't have to download anything additional more than likely with it. Everything will be on the cartridge itself. But with this next generation that's happening, you're obviously going to be getting bigger third-party AAA games. And, you know, we've seen some data where, you know, you could take the 60 gig file size down to something like 20 gigs that has been floating around there on the internet based on some of the DLSS stuff that Nintendo is doing with the Switch 2. But still, 20 gigs is bigger than 16 gigs. And I don't think those cartridges have actually come down substantially in size. But if you have Express micro SD card support for this system, and that is the basis of the micro SD card, if it is better with an Express micro SD card, you're getting faster read speeds, you're getting faster write speeds, speeding everything up, allowing the Switch system to have, or the Switch 2 system to have quicker access to the data that is on that micro SD card, thus giving you a more fluid game experience. So all because this says micro SD card, everyone just read that and was like, oh, well, GameStop is leaking some micro SD cards. It's like, no, bro. They're leaking Express micro SD cards, which is a different beast in and of itself. This technology is much newer. And that kind of plays into the whole mantra of the Switch 2 itself. Yes, on paper, it's not as strong as these other systems are, but it's using things that are very modern in terms of architecture, from the architecture of the system itself to the technology being used to power the artificial upscaling and artificial intelligence, things that will read things for games and potentially enhance them, and down to the micro SD cards themselves being Express micro SD cards instead of the standard micro SD card. So the fact that this is in GameStop's system already, I mean, once again, you have to imagine, like, once again, when I worked at GameStop, there was a couple of months that you would get lead up as far as accessories and stuff were concerned. Not something, if when I was working there, something that came out in the fall was not in the system already. Unless it was like a game itself that already had a concrete release date, you're not putting random accessories into the system. You're just not doing that yet, because the system would be overfilled with, you know, various things that aren't coming out in the immediate time frame for this. So this, to me, once again, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. You know, we kind of talked about it on Game and Talk the other night. Like, a game like Donkey Kong, you know, Country Returns Scam Edition HD, that doesn't need a whole lot of pomp and circumstance. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition just got a brand new trailer yesterday for the game. I don't think Nintendo's really factoring in those sorts of games with the unveiling of this system, with the potential unveiling of this system and the showcase of it, and then the mad dash to the marketplace for all these companies to get in stores. A lot of these companies are indeed saying April. And I think if you do it within the next week or two as far as unveiling the system, and then the system comes out at the tail end of April, I think that's a possibility. I really honestly think it's a possibility. And the more and more major companies that talk about this, the more and more major retailers that start to pop up with things in their database, there's a reason for it. There is a reason for them popping up in the database. This isn't some weird situation where you get, you know, some random game popping up in like Amazon of Mexico or something like that. Like, this is a actual situation where you can see that this is new information that has been added into the system, does not have an ETA time, estimated time of arrival to the warehouse yet, but obviously they're starting to integrate these things into their database, because they're gearing up for something. And I feel like that something is coming sooner rather than later. But I think the Express micro SD card could potentially be a game changer for the Switch. And, you know, just having those higher read and write speeds that are on the Switch right now, you know, it's going to allow for a lot of a smoother experience with things like reading data and potentially putting data onto these cards as well. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of all this? And what's your timetable for this system? Because I don't know, man. I'm kind of team April. I'm kind of team April for a release. I'm kind of team January for an unveiling, because a lot of things are happening. And, you know, if it was just one or two things, you could say that's circumstance. When it's a bunch of things, though, from a bunch of different places, you got to look at it with a different lens. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Be sure to give me your thoughts in the comments section down below. Be sure to like and share the video. Hit subscribe if you are new. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.